Hey, what's going on, guys? Devin here with Backcountry Exposure. Thanks for joining me today. Let's answer the question of, did you buy the right pieces of gear for backpacking? I'm excited to address this topic because it's something I've kind of thought about a bit recently, as I've had several people reach out to me and ask, is this the right piece of gear? Should I have bought this? Or what should I buy? Or what is the best quote unquote piece of gear for me to purchase? What's the best tent? What's the best sleeping bag? And I don't think that it is truly a valid argument to say that one piece of gear is the best piece of gear. And that's really what has driven this conversation is, did I buy or did you buy the right gear for backpacking? And so I'm going to use some other questions as kind of like checklists, kind of mental things for you to think about as you are looking at or using existing gear that you already have. So looking at meaning gear that you are planning to purchase. So I've got 4 or 5 questions that I want you to ask yourself when you are looking at backpacking gear to add or to replace other pieces of gear in your backpacking system. But the first question that I want you to ask yourself is, does this piece of gear fit within my budget? Can I afford it? Does it make sense for me to spend X amount of dollars for me to acquire this piece of gear? And that's totally up to you. Everybody has different finances. Everybody has different ways of spending money and different perceptions of what creates value for you and for the product. And so you have to decide for yourself, does this piece of gear fit within my budget? When I look at this myriad of tents that are behind me here, I've got tents that are all different types of price ranges. I've got everything from a $120 tent to like a $500 tent. Do I need to spend $500 on a tent? Probably not. Can I spend $120 on a tent and have the same experience? Yes. And if you guys have watched any of my videos over any period of time, that is a common comment that I have made over and over and over again, that expensive gear does not equal having a great experience on the trail. You do not have to have a Dyneema 15-ounce tent to have an experience that is so far greater than somebody else that's the only way that you can have a good experience in the backcountry. So know what fits within your budget and buy the gear that fits within your budget. The second question to talk about is, does this piece of gear accomplish the needs that I have for the particular area that I'm going to be backpacking in and the conditions that I'm going to be experiencing? Now, if you compare backpacking here in the West versus backpacking in the East, and even like going further west into like Pacific Northwest, every area that you backpack is going to have different conditions, different environmental type of settings, and things for you to consider when you're looking at buying a piece of gear. So should I say that this Outdoor Research Helium jacket is the best rain jacket for all conditions? Probably not. Here in the West, it does not rain that often, and maybe I don't need to spend as much money on a top of the line, high level rain jacket like this, and I can have something that's a lot cheaper, like the Frog Togs, for example, that fits that first question of being more budget friendly item. But if I'm maybe out in the Pacific Northwest where rain is very, very often occurring, as well as on the East where it's more humid, you get that misty kind of rain, and it's just more wet in general, then maybe having something like this totally is necessary. And you just have to decide, does that piece of gear fit the conditions for the area that I'm going to be in? Does a hammock make the most sense for what I'm doing? Or does a tent make the most sense? I may love hammock camping and I may love that aspect of being out in the backcountry, but if I am looking to do trips in other places, that's something to consider is, does this gear that I already have match the conditions in the environment that I'm going to be in, and does that make it the right piece of gear for me to take on that trip? Now, the third question to discuss is, does this piece of gear that I'm looking to buy or I have already purchased give me the confidence to feel safe and comfortable and everything out in the backcountry? There are some pieces of gear that I wouldn't necessarily rely on that give me a lot of confidence for what I'm going to be doing. And so this goes back to kind of the conditions, and these layer on top of each other a little bit as checklist items. But if I'm not confident in that piece of gear performing well for me, then that's dangerous. Like, that could put me in a position that would be an trip ender, basically, would end the trip for me, and I would have quite the learning experience from that. A good example might be using a tarp versus a fully enclosed tent. If you have never used a tarp in the backcountry before, that can be a very overwhelming, daunting thing when you know that you potentially are going to experience some pretty heavy storms, high winds, and that kind of thing. And so make sure that what you are purchasing also makes you feel confident and comfortable in the backcountry. Otherwise, you're not going to find yourself wanting to use that piece of gear, and then you're spending more money on other pieces of gear that are making that obsolete in your backpacking system, and you're never going to use it anymore. It's going to end up on a shelf. But my point is that make sure that when you buy it, you feel comfortable and confident that it's going to perform well out there in the backcountry for you. The fourth question I want to talk about is, does this piece of gear make it easier for you to get out into the backcountry and to actually go on trips? This tent that I've got right here is the Marmot Agate, and it's a great shelter, but does it apply to every situation and every condition and environment that I'm going to experience? And is it going to make it easier for me to get out or want to get out if this is the only option that I have? And so think about that when you go for, I'm really excited about hammock camping, but I'm going to travel to the desert and I don't have any tent options. So now I've got to consider purchasing a tent. Does having that make it difficult for me to enjoy different types of trips and experiences because it's such a specialty type of item? And that's not necessarily saying that hammocks are totally a specialty type of item, but you get my point. Do you find it easier to get out into the backcountry because of the item that you purchased rather than it being a hindrance, being so specialty and specific to a certain type of activity in the backcountry that you end up not using it, or it makes it difficult to get out into the backcountry? Now, the last consideration that I'll talk about has to do with just overall quality, and does it accomplish a lightweight aspect? I am a huge proponent of looking at any way that you can save weight in your backpacking system. So when you are looking to purchase a piece of gear, yes, does it fit within my budget, but can it also save me weight in my backpacking system? This is something that is really important. Also look at, is it coming from a reputable company? Is it coming from somebody that has a warranty? Does it have a backing of experience that says this is a quality piece of gear that has been field tested and people stand behind it? Does it work? All of those things are important considerations as well. And I can fully understand how daunting and overwhelming it is to try and figure out all of these different scenarios of, did I buy the right piece of gear? And over here to my right, I've got this rack of fly fishing gear. And I am in that mindset right now with fly fishing where I don't have a full understanding of all of the specific things that make different fly rods better than another fly rod, different reels than other reels, and what makes the most sense for this type of fish that I'm fishing for, or this type of water, lakes versus rivers. That's all information that in the backpacking realm I have down to a T, totally figured out. I know exactly what I need and what makes sense. When it comes to this, I'm in that beginner learning phase of still learning what pieces of gear are the right pieces of gear, and I'm doing my research, trying to figure things out. So that is my last recommendation, is to slow down a little bit, do your research, and you will be able to really dial in the right piece of gear so that you can say, yes, I did buy the right piece of gear for backpacking. Thank you for watching today, guys. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe. I would love for you to hit that bell notification to get notified when I post new videos. You guys are awesome. I hope you are having a great summer. We will catch you on the next video. See you later.